We are always happy to welcome in the studio when he's available, our good friend Mark Alford, Missouri Congressman, 4th Congressional District. He is waving to the cameras on KCMO. Does it feel like you're back in the studio?
I love cameras.
Made a living on them.
I don't know. I haven't got, well, you know, I used to get up at 3 in the morning for like 23 years. And now I've reverted to, I think, a regular sleep schedule. So I got up, I couldn't sleep last night. We're on this big tour across our district. We were out yesterday for 2 days. We went down to Fort Leonard Wood. We're leaving again today to go to Warsaw and some other, covering 15 counties in this little trip while I'm home.
Okay, so you're home till when?
Let's see. I'm home till Sunday. On Easter Sunday, we fly to Washington. And I'm going to Northern Europe with the chairman of the Armed Services Committee to go to some military bases there. And
Excellent.
We're going to be talking to Denmark about Greenland.
Really?
Yeah, I will not be negotiating to get Greenland, but we will be talking about that. You know, Russia is very involved with their submarine fleet up there, and we have some real concerns about that. I'm no longer on the Armed Services Committee, but I am on the Appropriations Committee. And we're, you know, I'm heavily involved with the armed services still in making sure that we are rebuilding our military after Joe Biden tried to decimate it.
So are you laying the foundation for further conversations on Greenland?
I'm going to let the chairman of the armed services do that.
Okay.
When I go on these congressional delegation trips, I'm usually last to. These are so weird. No one told me, and I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but no one told, and I got to write this
Well, you brought it up. You brought it up.
But no one told me how these congressional delegation trips work. So last October, I went with the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to the Middle East. We went to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. And we flew in the still of the night in a C-130 into Israel, and were picked up in an armored van to go meet the Prime Minister Netanyahu. But when you go in there, the senior member, the chairman, typically, they will have a conversation with the lead, whether it's a prime minister or a defense minister. And then they go down the line, and you get a question to ask. I got to even ask one of King Abdullah. We had lunch with him in Jordan. But usually the most junior member, and that would be me, asks the last question. Well, all the good questions are gone,
Yeah.
You know, after you get down to 5 or 6 people. But it's still very interesting, and it's very I don't know, it's surreal. I'm sitting here with these world leaders, this former smart aleck on the Fox News station here in Kansas City, and now I'm asking these pertinent questions about the future of our world and how we're going to maneuver through this mess that Joe Biden left us.
It's amazing. That's the American dream. Mark Alford is here on KCMO. So take me through, you know, the IRS protest. We were just talking about them to start the show here in Kansas City. It is unbelievable the way the media is covering it and the way that there are these fits being thrown on street corners on tax day, which to me is not the day to try to garner sympathy from the public.
It's crazy. And here's what's crazier, Pete. When this first came out, late February and March, and these organized disruptors really raided my little small intimate coffee I was supposed to be having with my constituents in Belton, and they were shouting and they wouldn't let me answer the questions they wanted answered. They were saying, oh, it's 1,000 people laid. We have 1,000 people laid off at the IRS center. And I think what do they employ, like 3,000, something like that. So now it's down to less than 100. Do you hear the media really making that point? Did you hear that in any of the points yesterday in the media? No. They're not correcting the record, as we say in Congress. We need to correct the record. Let's deal with facts and truth. Look, as I told the people in Belton that were there, and I understand people who, you know, get laid off. I worked for Fox 4 for 23 years. We had 4 different owners. Every time a new owner came in, there were layoffs. You just talked about that in the radio business. It happens in real life, all right? I don't like to see anyone laid off, but just because you're a government employee doesn't mean that's a job for life. And they really berated me at the very end when I stood there and took their questions for an hour and a half. When I wanted to leave them with a little hope, I said, look, guys, this is not the end of your story. God has a plan and purpose for your life. You're not a victim. You're a victor. And you are going to come out better with a better paying job. I'm confident of that. And they're like, we don't need your God. It was almost demonic.
I was going to say, you said the 3-letter word they do not want to hear.
Oh, my goodness.
The government is God, right? In their eyes.
Exactly.
In many of their eyes, unfortunately.
But anyway, yeah, on the days that we pay taxes, it's not probably a good idea to try to garner sympathy by actually not being in there doing your job and out on the sidewalk. It reminds me a couple of years ago when I was doing the news, and they would have these protests on McDonald's. The SEIU organized these protests, right?
Yeah.
The owners of these local McDonald's are making, a 4% margin? Not a lot of money, but everyone wanted a $15 an hour minimum wage. And so the SEIU would grab employees, take them out of service for the noon lunch hour and have them on the street corner. Well, that's not a good way to keep your job if you want to make more money in a particular job. The way to succeed in business is to make yourself indispensable. Mm-hmm. Work harder than anyone else, show up first, leave last. That's the American way. And to try to justify your job through other means, I don't think employers really are appreciative of that. It doesn't work in the business that you're in the business that I used to be in.
Not at all. Mark Alford, Missouri Congressman, is here on KCMO. So where are we at, Congressman, on the, as it's been dubbed for months now, the big, beautiful bill?
The big, beautiful bill.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
Inside story, we were in conference last week. We have a Republican conference meeting every week when we get back to Washington. And Mike Johnson, our speaker, says Trump actually wants, when this bill comes out on the floor, he wants to actually call it the big, beautiful bill.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know if anyone else knows that. He did that with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, though. Back in 2017, they were going to call it something real formal. And he says, what is this bill about? They said it's about cutting taxes and adding jobs. He said, well, let's call it the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Well, that's perfect. That's where he just gets
That's the common sense that President Trump brings to the table and that I love. He's cutting through the BS. So the reconciliation process that we're going to go through now, this is a little bit wonky. I'll take just a few minutes to explain it. To do something as big as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, to renew that after 5 years, it's going to expire at the end of the year. The tax rate of 24% is going to go up to 28%. For the average family, it's going to mean an increase of about $2,000 in a tax increase. The Democrats lie and say it's about billionaires and millionaires. It's not. It's about small business owners in Kansas City and my district in rural Missouri who are going to have a tax increase from 21% to over 35%. It's going to put a lot of businesses out of business. So in order to get this passed, we have to do it through a reconciliation process where you don't need a supermajority in the U.S. Senate of 60 votes to prevent a filibuster. You can do it with 51 votes. The Senate parliamentarian decides what can fit in that bill. It has to be budgetary. It cannot include Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. What we can do, though, is find savings through these programs, and what we're going to do. And one example in Medicaid is that if you get on Medicaid, the state or federal government doesn't look at your case for another year. But if you become eligible, say you were ill, got on Medicaid, couldn't work, and then maybe you get better and should be working or should be out looking for a job, there are going to be work requirements. They don't look at your case for a year. We're going to move that back to 6 months. That's going to save some money right there. Some practical things that we can do. So under the reconciliation process, we are taking the House version of the budget, the Senate version of the budget, and reconciling them like you would a checkbook or like we used to do. I never really did. Was great at that. But anyway.
That's what Leslie's for.
Yes,
she's great
exactly.
at that.
And we'll come up with a package that will include the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and maybe some other budgetary-related items that we will get passed in the House, we will get passed in the Senate, and then the president will sign into law.
How do the DOGE cuts factor into the bill, or are they two separate things?
There could be some DOGE cuts in there. That's more in the appropriations process, and now that I'm on the appropriations committee, I'm really starting to get my head around how that's working. So at the same time, we're waiting on the president's budget for 2026. The continuing resolution that we just passed was for the 2025 budget to keep the government funding till the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of September. Once we get the president's budget, they're supposed to have it by mid-February, but a new president's always late. So we're getting this, at least the framework of it. We will divide that up to the 12 subcommittees in appropriations. I sit on 4 of those subcommittees. And the chairs of those subcommittees have a certain number that they have to reach to meet this top line number, and then we start allocating that money. Now, what will happen now because of DOGE is making immediate cuts, but they're also making recommendations as we go forward. For example, the USAID program, that was under one of my subcommittees, State and Foreign Operations. That's now moved over to the State Department. So that money will go directly to the State Department, and the State Department will fund that program. It used to be under just our Appropriations Committee, and the problem was, I went in and said, how does this happen? How are we funding these woke programs? There are some really good programs under USAID, but there are a lot of them that aren't, probably about 80% of them. My suggestion is, and I'm hoping they take me up on this, we start calling them national security investment projects. If it doesn't have to do with national security, we're not going to fund it.
And put them in the State Department
Put them in the State Department anyway.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So it's really about basically creating a more efficient operation like we do in the private sector every day.
And Pete, we in Congress start doing our jobs better.
Yeah.
That's the whole deal with the Chevron deference decision. That's a whole nother conversation. But the Supreme Court basically came back and said, look, if we're going to peel EPA back from this overregulation, Congress, you got to step up and write better legislation so it's not open to interpretation and all this rulemaking that these unelected bureaucrats have been doing, and they take over Washington. We pass a law that's not real thorough, and then the agencies, the bureaucrats who aren't elected, they write the rules to interpret the law. We need to do a better job of writing the laws, and that's what we're going to do in the authorization committees and then the appropriation committee that I'm on.
Mark Alford is here. Last thing for you in the last couple of minutes. Obviously, this man from El Salvador, who's now back in El Salvador, has been the biggest media story of the week because we know what their agenda is on this whole deal. But due process is part of the question. What his status is, should the administration try to bring him back? Where are you at on this whole story?
The Supreme Court says that the administration should facilitate that. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that Trump's going to order the president of El Salvador, who was just in the Oval Office, and said he's not going to make it happen anyway. I mean, how do you force a sovereign nation to return a citizen of theirs back to the United States for possible prosecution? I don't know. I guess they'd be shipped to Gitmo. This guy's a thug. This guy is a member of MS-13. Yeah, they made a mistake and said he was a member of Tren de Agua. There were some clerical mistakes. But this guy needs to be back. And now you have Cory Booker, who's going to run for president. You know, he did that big, long speech on the Senate floor and then is playing this false humility game. And now he's going down to try to rescue this guy today. Well, I hope he makes it back. That's all I can say.
That's a great point. Mark Alford on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, streaming on the app. So you're in town till Sunday, and then when do you think this big, beautiful bill is done by?
So Speaker Johnson is hoping by the end of May, Memorial Day, that we have this done. We get back in a week and a half. And while I'm here working in the district, our leaders in the party and in the conference, I think Jason Smith, chairman of Ways and Means, he's still up in D.C. They are still working on this while we're working in our district.
Very good.
So we don't have a lot of time. We've got to get this done. Time is not on our side.
And Mark Alford's Capitol Report coming up Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. You got your guests lined up yet by chance?
It's Mark Alford's Capitol Recap. I don't know exactly. We're putting the show together as we speak. We're going to include a lot of our district trip. Very interesting conversations. I was in Fort Leonard Wood yesterday. We trained 80,000 personnel there in Pulaski County. We are trying to get a new shooting range. And, we're getting 5 new companies there. We're building some new barracks. But there are some things that are very centric to that region economically that we need to make sure that base does not end up on the base realignment and closure list.
Very good. We'll be listening, my friend. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Missouri Congressman Mark Alford, 4th Congressional District on KCMO.